Welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is the 25th of January, 2025, and Bitcoin is trading above 104,000 and Kaspa is trading at 13 cents. And today we'll be talking about how using a DCA strategy, investing in power law following assets is coming along. We'll talk specifically a little about what I think is happening with Kaspa right now. In a nutshell, I think we have reached a point of being fairly stable, and we may be coming back into following a power law going ahead. And I'll discuss what the evidence is and what I think is happening. And as again, this is not financial advice, so this is for informational purposes only. So do your own research. All right, let's start off with a quick summary and figuring out and getting back up to speed. What is a power law asset? A power law asset is an asset when we plot the price versus time on a log-log scale seems to follow a straight line. Bitcoin is the most widely known. Here you can see on the x-axis we have time, log time, and on the y-axis we have log price. The blue line is the actual price, and the red line is the trend line over here. And as you can see, it has a really good linear R-squared fit of over 0.96, which means it does a really good job of explaining the long-term behavior of the price using the straight line. Similarly, another asset that follows a power law or was following a power law in the past was Kaspa. Again, same concept. The blue line is the price, the red line is the trend line. But you see, that the equation is different, but more importantly, the R squared is different. It's 0.90. It used to be around 0.94, 0.95, but lately that has deviated from this line. And you can see visually that is very clear over here. So that is what a power law following asset is. And when we take that into the linear domain, when we think about days being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, price being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of in the log plane when it's 1, 10, 100, in the linear plane, we end up with curves. And because we know it's following a straight line in the log-log plane, if we believe that the future is going to be like the past, we can make some estimates of what sort of returns we can expect. So doing this for Bitcoin results in an estimate for having a value in about a year's time for about 146, 147,000 if we remain on trend. But of course, you can see the price jumps above trend quite often in the past. So it may also go up above trend also, in which case we may have higher values than this. But the expectation is if we stay on trend, we'd be getting a value of about 150,000 in a year's time. Similarly, for Kaspa, we also can do a trend analysis in this sense. And we can see that right now, here's what the price is, but based on the expectation, if it goes back to this red line in a year's time, we'd be looking at a value of about 71 cents. Okay, and that's a 451% return versus Bitcoin's expected return, which is more in the 40% range. Now, 40% is fantastic, of course, but a lot of people and a lot of the crypto world were looking in terms of X's, like am I doubling, tripling, quadrupling, 10xing, 100xing my money, right? But for most people, this 40% is a pretty good return if you look at it compared to other assets like the stock market and bonds, etc. The reason, though, that we aren't putting everything into Kaspa is because we have a lot fewer days with Bitcoin. We have about 5,500 validated days. Whereas with Kaspa, we have less than 1/5. So the reliability is a lot less, right? Because we just haven't had as much of a track record. So in order to figure out how should we invest when we have different amounts of return, but different amount of confidence in that the future is going to look like the past, I developed the triangle algorithm here. And this basically takes an allocation. It looks at how reliable the previous data is, how much data we have, what our future expectations are, and then balances those out and along with a healthy distribution of cash. And here in the channel, that's what we've been following. So we started all the way back in August 19th, 2024, and now we've come down all the way over here to the 25th, and you can see that we have gotten an average price of Kaspa of about 13.5 cents and an average price for Bitcoin for about 75,000. And in addition, what we ended up doing, we're investing a daily amount. Some of it goes to Bitcoin, some of it goes to Kaspa, following this triangle, and some of it goes to cash. And the cash we hold off here in given that how volatile these assets are, that we have always some cash available if we get a sudden opportunity when the price drops down, we can buy some more. So as you can see, these are all limit orders that I had placed in public on this channel, and you can go and see those because it's important to be transparent about this. And the one final order that didn't hit as yet is for Kaspa at 9.5 cents. That's what I thought was the absolute bottom, and I had made that limit order on December 23rd. So it's been about 3 weeks, 4 weeks since it's been about a month, right? 4 weeks, and that hasn't hit us yet. So if we look at what the results have been so far, they have not been that amazing, right? 5% is not that great, but we haven't lost any money following this, which is really the important thing. What most of us are really interested in here is trying to understand, is Kaspa going to be that jet train that I can take to enhance my portfolio returns? And what we've been having from Kaspa is a deviation from the power law, right? You can see it here in the log chart, right? We were all the way here, and then we started bouncing around, went up, and then started bouncing around here. And typically in the past, the -50 trend line, as demonstrated by this teal line over here, right, has been the point that we've bounced off from. But now we've been bouncing underneath it, and we seem to be bouncing along it, right? And why did this happen? As I've discussed in my channel previously, I think the culprit was the introduction of KRC20. KRC20 increased the supply that was going to miners. So the miners are the guys that are mining Kaspa, and every time there's a transaction, they receive a block reward for mining that particular block, as well as transaction fees that get stored on that block. And while the mining rewards that they were getting have been going down by about 5% every month, all of a sudden we had a sudden spike in transaction fees. So these miner bros suddenly had a lot more Kaspa to sell if they wanted to, and many of them I suspect did sell, right? And here in this chart, you can see in blue is showing you the fees, right? So before KRC20 started, KRC20 started on the 15th of September. The Kaspa fees were 1,000, 2,000, pretty small. But then you suddenly started shooting up to 21 million, right? And at this point, the amount of Kaspa that was being produced by the mining was maybe 8 million or so, right? So all of a sudden, you had 2.5 times what you're getting through mining suddenly being available in terms of fees, right? So all that additional Kaspa went somewhere, and a bunch of it went down when it was sold to the market. That put selling pressure down, right? So let me talk about why I think this paradigm is about to change. With any natural system, especially something that has been showing the power law, that power law representation over here, right, is a reflection of supply and demand. Right now, we know that there's a mathematical progression to what the supply of Kaspa was. And until KRC20 happened, the miners had a steadily decreasing amount of Kaspa coming out of their mining operations, right? And then the hash rate, which is the amount of total capacity in the market, kept on increasing because you had more and more people coming in to say like, hey, I can mine this and I can make some money. My costs of producing or mining Kaspa are lower than my prices of buying it in the market. And that sort of balance between this underlying demand, having this network growth, I told someone told someone else, someone figured out from other people's conversation on the net. It was going forward in a mathematically defined way, which is amazing when you think about it, right? And Kaspa and Bitcoin are the only ones that seem to follow this. And it says probably something to do with proof of work and the fact that it's forming an active community underlying it. I think most people don't talk about, we only talk about it from the supply side, but the demand side is really critical, right? Because in order to have a price, you need to have supply being matched with demand. So the supply is going down, but the amount of demand is going up, and that pushes the price up gradually over time. And that's what was happening in this programmatically power law sort of following way. And then you had KRC20 and things threw off. But typically, what happens is after a period of time, systems like these end up coming to form another equilibrium. And so the danger was, has the demand actually been disrupted to such an extent that it's going to not come back, right? And I think we are beginning to see signs of the system stabilizing. And I'm going to talk about some different ways in which I think we can see that happening. So the first one is looking at just at the price. And again, this is a really small sample here, but you can sort of see that we started bouncing around here on this particular trend line, which is about 50% lower than where we were, right? And I had created this analysis, which I had shared with you, my subscribers, that, hey, we kind of had this break. Let's assume that we had an increase in the supply, right, at August 25th, on September 15th. And after that, we dipped down. And the amount of dip was proportional to the amount of supply increase that had come on. But if we start looking at this chart over here, and again, this is a visual comparison because the amount of data points that we have is not very large. From about the middle of December onwards, we seem to be bouncing around this trend line. And just visually, it appears to me that we are getting to the point where maybe it's starting to follow some sort of power law, right? So that's one piece of evidence here. We have this graphic here, and I'll just move this to the side so we can all discuss this later, right? The next part is that we also seem to have got some stability here in terms of the amount of KRC20 emissions, right? If you look at it, when we had spiked in the middle, you had this huge spike, you had 24 million, and then you had 21 million over here, 119,000. But if you look at what's happening, we had another spike here, went to 102.5 million. Then after that, we've been bouncing around the bottom, right? And if we go into the log scale over here, right, you can sort of see fairly clearly that in terms of magnitude, we're maybe at a million over there. This was in October, but then towards December, we're now in the 390,000. And if you go even on a smaller time frame, the last month, and let me just make this linear since it will be easier just to understand what's going on. You see that these blue lines over here, they aren't really jumping up quite as much as they used to be. It's 340,000 now, right? And as a fraction of the total emissions, which are maybe about 6 million or so, you're looking at just 5%, right? Whereas before it was more than 200%, right? So the amount of KRC20 fees that are being generated because of all the KRC20 tokens that were being traded, as the excitement around them is dying down, as that gets into a stable situation, the fees also start stabilizing. And so the underlying dynamics of the system, the underlying demand, which was being overwhelmed by all the stuff that was going on with KRC20, starts becoming more apparent, right? So if the supply that has died down is about 5%, right? Now we're having a new equilibrium, and there's some sort of shift from the original dynamics, of course, but we're finding that balance between supply and demand taking place. So again, I'll move this over here so we have that to reference. Here's the chart of Kaspa versus Bitcoin. And again, it's a trend analysis, and I haven't done this quantitatively, but I do want to point out that we definitely took a dive down, right? From September 15th, 24. We dropped, found a period of brief stability, and then dropped down again over here. But now it seems that we've been bouncing around relative to Bitcoin for a while. Now we know Bitcoin follows a power law, and the CAS USDT ratio is also following a power law. We don't have enough samples, but there seems to be some degree of stability coming over here at this point, which is okay. There's another piece of evidence. Now let me add one counterpoint to this. The counterpoint is that compared to the rest of the crypto market, this is the total amount of the market cap of Kaspa divided by the altcoin market. We still have a downtrend over there. The downtrend really started around, you can see when September 15th kicked in over here. We started seeing a big downtrend over here. We had a jump in price. I think this was maybe about the excitement of being listed on KuCoin or something else. But then again, we dropped down, right? So if you look at this, we've just kind of been following this long trend line down. And we would expect that if things really were stable, and this is why I'm saying it's a counterpoint, that we would not only be doing at least remaining level with the rest of the altcoin market, but for Kaspa would be actually increasing its market cap. And we don't see that quite as yet. So that's a counterpoint to maybe we haven't reached that stability as yet. Okay. And again, I'm not saying this is conclusive evidence either way. I'm just trying to give you guys a balanced perspective on what I'm seeing over here and what we can expect. So the way I look at this going forward is on balance, it seems to me that we are probably entering a regime where things are stable. Oh, I do want to show you guys one more thing that is in favor of uh, showing that we are at some sort of stability. And this is hash rate, right? Hash rate is the total amount of computational power that the network is going through. And as you can see, it follows this nice progression, steps up, and the hash rate also follows a power law, even though I haven't dug time into it, quite into it. All right, let's go to a 1 year time frame. Hash rate is going up, and then we start seeing this sustained drop. And then it peaks up, and then there's a sustained drop. And a lot of people started asking, "Oh, is Casper dead?" And I made a video about this. You can check that out. That was my most popular video so far. That people were really interested in saying, "Okay," and I was very clear that hey, this was mining dynamics, and the price had gotten to a point where the inefficient miners were getting out of it, and no new miners were getting into it. And that's exactly what we see here, right? If we zoom in over here to a 3 month period, the let's look over here, right? The hash rate over here, right? You see the price drops down and the hash rate drops down. The price goes up and the hash rate goes up. It's a little easier to see if we step back. So let me go here, right? So you can see particularly in this section over here, right? This is from December 30th onwards. The hash rate goes down when the price is going down. And when the price goes up, this is where it's fun, right? When the price goes up, which is this black line over here, the hash rate starts going up, right? So now you've got a bunch of miners that are on the fence that are turning it on and turning it off based on what the price is, which is again an equilibrium kind of behavior, right? Everyone is not getting out in such a large quantity that they just don't give a shit, like, oh, we're losing money on this hand over fist. Now they're saying, like, yeah, we're right at the margin, right? So there's a balance between supply and demand. So there are again, so this again is supports my understanding and my hypothesis that we are getting to an equilibrium state. Now, some people will say, oh, we're always in an equilibrium state. That's right, but it's a more stable, longer lasting equilibrium state. So, again, to summarize, there are 4 pieces of evidence that support that we are getting to an equilibrium state, and 1 piece of evidence that is against it. So, number one, just visually, it looks that we are tracking some sort of power law. It's a very small period of time, about a month or so, but we're bouncing around what seems to be a power law trend. Again, it's too short for us to do a detailed analysis, but just visually, having looked at these charts for a long time, intuitively, I'm sort of seeing like, it could be getting back to a power law. Number two, we've seen that the amount of KRC20 fees has dropped down and seems to be a pretty small, stable amount, around 5% or so for the last month. We do see some spikes in the fees, but they don't seem to be as massive as the spikes that we were seeing before when we were in the millions. Now we're in the 500,000, 100,000 sort of range. Versus Bitcoin, we seem to have reached some sort of stability. We're bouncing around this. Of course, we don't know if it's a bottom or not. It could go down, but again, at least for this period of time, we do have this stability that's taking place. And number four, the hash rate and the hash rate is now seeming to be balanced by the price. When the price goes up, hash rate goes up to try and take advantage of it. When the price goes down, the hash rate also goes down, meaning that there are a lot of miners right at the edge that are turning on and off their capacity, which again suggests a more longer term equilibrium rather than people just getting out and the hash rate just dropping or the hash rate just taking off, right? And then on the counterpoint, we have that we're still falling versus the altcoin market, and we haven't really seen that sort of stability with Kaspa versus the altcoin market. Now, the altcoin market has a lot of other things going on, and one of the appeals for Kaspa has been that it follows a power law, which is somewhat independent from the rest of the market. That's what was appealing to me. But we would still want to see it have some degree of stability, right? And I'm not convinced. I'm still trying to understand what this means. It could be that the altcoin market is just is going up because of factors that don't affect Caspa quite as much, and Caspa is doing its own thing. But the flip side of that is, hey, if I can make better money just by investing in other altcoins, then why wouldn't I be following that, right? But we'll see how this shapes up. So just wanted to bring you guys up to speed. Please like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you find out about these videos. I do have some really interesting stuff that I'm working on that's a little different from this that will allow myself and my subscribers an insight on how we can actually use the shorter term movements of Caspa and keeping in light that it's following a power law. And I think now is a good time for me to start sharing with you guys. So we'll bring that up on the next video. But for now, cheers and have a great day. All the best.